I'll steal a quote. Buying solar without a smart meter is like buying a car without a speedo. You just got no idea what you're doing.
I think that quote actually came from Adrian Aronho, our ex-GM. So
stole it. Was this after World War II?
Yeah.
You guys weren't involved in welding up tanks and stuff?
Yeah, no.
No, that's good to hear. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Nexus Point Podcast. You're here with myself, Luke Cove, and a very special guest today from Fronius, Rod Dewar. How are you, Rod?
Yeah, good, mate. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming in. Now, I like to get straight into it at the beginning of my podcast. Now, do you want to just give me a quick rundown of, who you are, what's your position in the industry, and what you do at Fronius?
So I've been in the industry going on 15 years almost now. So I've been at Fronius pretty much the whole time. And my title is Head of Solution Management. So our department, or my department, looks after everything to do with that name. So solutions to do with, how they are for customers, how they are for the industry, how do we fit in terms of being able to sell our product, certification, compliance, product needs, where the market's going, etc. So that's pretty much what it does. So I've been with Fronius ever since I got back to Australia after living in Germany for 15 years. So, yeah.
Yeah, wow, Germany. Okay, cool. Well, speaking of that part of the world, Austria, so I believe Fronius is originally from Austria and it was started a very long time ago, a family-run business. Could you give me a quick rundown on that?
Yep. So are from Austria and they're still in Austria. I think, was it 78 years old? I think it is now. So family started a business in 1945 with Gunther Fronius with welding equipment. So battery chargers. They started with the battery chargers. And it really started out as back in those days when you had a car and my car battery, you couldn't really recharge them, so they went flat. Then that was it. You had to throw them away and get a new one. So he wasn't the only one who invented, but he was instrumental in bringing the technology forward in terms of battery charging. So that's where it all started out. So in terms of energy conversion, back then it was obviously AC to DC. Then they went into welding, which is again conversion of energy, and then solar in the early 90s went along. So yeah.
Yeah, very very long time ago. Was this after World War II?
Yeah.
You guys weren't involved in welding up tanks and stuff.
Yeah, no.
And that was not you. Okay, that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah. It's interesting. It's funny. We have some customers, they're Boilermakers and stuff. We mentioned Fronius. Their eyes light up.
Yeah,
they love it. It's got a really good reputation. So Fronius has been a family run business this whole time for basically 78 years is what you're saying.
Still is, yeah. So
okay.
It's still family owned, yeah.
So you've worked with them for 15 years. So do you feel like you're part of the family?
Yeah, I guess I do. I mean, one of the main reasons I got the job in the first place was on the job ad. It said a German is an advantage. So obviously living in Germany, I learned German while I was there. I didn't learn it as a child. My wife's German as well. Got to use that as that kind of didn't only get me the job, but it kind of helped. So since then, and so whenever I have lots of meetings with HQ and the R&D department and everything, and I'm always speaking German to them. So they understand what I'm saying. I mean, their English is quite good, but I know what I'm saying in German, so then it's easier to get things across. So yeah.
Yeah, because as we know, the Germans have a very good reputation for production and efficiency and quality. And they got very, very good at that stuff for a while there. I think they still are, but there's a lot of other places that are catching up. But yeah, look, that's good to know. So as far as Fronius in Australia, what's the presence in Australia like? Like, how many offices do you have here? Do you have tech support that's all operated from Australia?
Yeah, so I started when we first opened up. So I mean, Fronius has been selling into Australia since the early 2000s, I guess, just through distributors. And then they set up a subsidiary in 2010, and that's when I started with them. So that's based in Melbourne, out at Tullamarine. started out with 9 people. I was one of the 9, and now we're sitting at around about 55, 56 people. We also have a second office in Perth, which we've had for around 5 or 6 years now, mainly as a support office, so sales support, but also technical support. So in order to help support the installers of that side of the country with the big time zone difference, and also doing time zone support, help other countries as well. So, but yeah, we've got a big tech support based in Australia, and also a repair centre. So I think some other companies do that now, but we have an actual repair centre in Tullamarine where we fix the inverters themselves. We don't just throw them away. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That there's been a couple instances where there's been some minor issues with inverters, and we've sent them back. And I've actually been to your headquarters in Tullamarine.
Okay.
They showed me out the back. They were a bit sketchy actually when I said I wanted to go out the back, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you can go have a look, just don't touch anything." Because I think there was a barbecue out the front, and people were having some drinks. I think maybe they didn't want to let a whole bunch of people that have been drinking in the back. But it is interesting to see how you guys don't just throw stuff away. You actually get it out into the factory and test it and find out what's wrong with it and fix those specific parts, and can kind of get things up and running and back out into the field, which is good. That's sustainable. Yeah,
well, that's a massive part of the company's vision as well as sustainability. So we have a whole sustainability department. We'd have like a big kind of, let's say, booklet that talks about all the different sustainability things we do. With the Gen 24, that's one of the big pluses of that. So, using recycled aluminium, using recycled plastics, etc. So there's a lot of different bits and pieces which are using recycled, let's say, minerals and components. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. Sustainability is what we're all about. So do you want to give me just a quick rundown of what the main product range is for Fronius at the moment?
So at the moment we've transitioned, as you probably know, from the Snap inverter range, which first started coming out around 2013. So the Gen 24 range is the current range, which we have in single phase and 3-phase, anywhere between 3 and 10 kilowatts. Then we have some commercial inverters, or let's say C&I, commercial industrial, up to around your 30 kilowatt mark. So we're just bringing out a new product, hopefully getting CC listing this week, which is the Verto, which is our new 25 to 33.3 commercial product, just in a normal grid connect inverter. And then we have some larger, up to 100 kilowatts, and bringing out sometime this year, if the certification goes through, 125 kilowatt as well.
Okay. Do you still have the 100 kilowatt Toro?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, we did one of them. It's a really good inverter. Okay. No, that's good. What do you have in the way of EV charging and batteries?
So EV charging, we have our Wattpilot. So there's 2 or multiple versions of that. You have the 11 kilowatt and the 22 kilowatt version. That's mainly around the current rating that you can do. So if you're doing single phase, you always want to do the 22 because it's a 32 amp current rating, means you get the full 7.4 kilowatts to the charger. And then you have the Go, which funnily enough, when we were first releasing it, I was skeptical myself, but who's going to use that? Because it's in Europe, it's quite common to take the charger with you and plug it into like a 3-phase plug, etc. Because a lot of people have got 3-phase. And we also have a different plug on it, so we need the Australian plug for it. So we looked at the numbers and we thought, let's give that a try. But funnily enough, we've been selling quite a few of those that people actually do take it with them, let's say at hotels or motels, etc., where there's maybe not a high power charging station. Then you can charge it on a 3-phase plug, and people using it at their premises, so installers even using it at their warehouses. So it's basically got a 3-phase connector on it. You can get an adapter made up for single phase if you want, but you need to get someone to make that up. But it usually just uses a standard 3-phase socket.
Yeah, that's interesting. We looked at the Wattpilot Go. We had a couple of them go out. But yeah, I was like you. I was skeptical at first because I thought, okay, you can install a 3-phase power point at your house, but why wouldn't you just hardwire the charger? And then, you can take this anywhere you go, but, you go to an Airbnb or a hotel, most places only have single-phase power points.
Yeah, correct.
So I was a bit like, maybe it might work for some people. But yeah, we've had a few people put in orders for it, so obviously there is demand for it. If there's 3-phase chargers there out in the field, or 3-phase power points out in the field, then it's if you know where you're going. Maybe if you've got a holiday house, you could just install a 3-phase power point, and it'd be cheaper than installing 2 EV chargers at either end.
Yep. So as I said, it's sold more than we thought we would, I think, though. So
yeah. It's interesting. I saw another video on YouTube. I think it was Mark Kavanagh. He was doing a review of the Zappy charger, the My Energy Zappy charger, which was, he didn't like it hugely. But then he opened up the Zappy charger and showed the guts, and I thought, oh, it looks okay. And then he opened up the Wattpilot and he goes, look at this. And it was so much cleaner inside, just the way all the electronics was put together and all welded into like one board. It was like, okay, so these guys actually know what they're doing. Like the Zappy looks like something that a Sparky just like whipped up inside a switchboard on the inside. Good charger though. But it's interesting to see the difference. So guys obviously are very efficient with how you put a charger together and an inverter. I had another question. I wanted you to elaborate. So the old inverters, the primal inverters was a great inverter. I cut my teeth installing them back in the day. Probably installed thousands of them myself, and now you guys have moved to the Gen 24. Now, what's the difference between the two? And I also want you to address the complaints we get around noise, because with the old primal inverters, we did used to get a lot of complaints from people saying it was too noisy in particular instances. So what's the difference between the two inverters, and what have you done about the noise?
So the main difference, I guess, between them is they're a hybrid inverter. And the way we did, so the Primo inverters, the Snap inverters were only a grid connect inverter. So the size has been reduced as well, and the whole cooling concept. So with the Snap inverters, you had a smaller heatsink at the back and a smaller fan. So the main reason some of those were then perhaps noisy, and acoustics plays a lot of the surrounding area and objects and walls and things plays a big part in it as well. So depending on how that is, that can amplify itself. So, but the fan was quite small, and so let's say the tone or the tenure of the sound was, in some cases, could have been annoying, I guess. So with the Gen 24s, the fan's now at the front, and the cooling concept is a lot different. So the heat sink's larger. The fan, let's say the frequency of the fan noise is a lot lower and deeper, and so maybe it's not quite as maybe annoying as the Snap inverter could have been. So
yeah, it was interesting with the old Primo inverters. They seem to get louder the more the inverter was producing power. So like we had a 15 kilowatt inverter once. I put my ear up to it and I was like, wow, that is loud. But it was producing a lot of power, and then a lot of people, they come and they go, oh, we're really worried about the inverter being loud next to our bedroom when we're asleep. And I go, well, good news, because it's not running when you're asleep, so it's going to be fully shut down. So that's a good thing to consider, I think. With the hybrid inverters, so you mentioned the Gen 24 is a hybrid. Now I know that's technically a software upgrade, isn't it? So it comes as a normal standard string inverter, and then you software upgrade it, and then you can add BYD batteries onto the inverter. Now, I know Fronius used to do their own batteries, and now I don't think you do it at all anymore, not in Australia, and you've just moved to partnering with BYD. Now, what was behind that decision, and how are you finding that working out for you right now?
That's going really well. So we've got a very close relationship with BYD. We looked at other different vendors, battery manufacturers, etc. Obviously visited the companies in their R&D departments, etc. And BYD was a great team to work with. They're a massive company, as you probably know, in terms of, I can't remember what it is last time, but in terms of sales, they're more than Tesla in terms of the electric cars. So they really know batteries, and the relationship worked very well. We've got ongoing support that we have from them. So at the start in Australia, in terms of a support perspective, some of the installers or some, let's say, retailers were perhaps concerned about, okay, we need to speak to two different companies, etc. But we've done a lot of work to, let's say, combat that or make that a lot better experience, at least for the installer, or I'd say for a customer. So when they call our support are very good now at picking up issues that may be with the battery or let's say connection type stuff. And if so we do a lot of the troubleshooting for BYD, even though it's maybe not our product or we're not the ones selling it. And then when it gets to a certain stage where we need the BYD guys support to come in, then we have like a direct line to them where we ping them via chat and say, okay, I've had this installed. This is the rundown. This is what we've done. Can you guys please take over? Okay, what's the number? And then they basically call in back straight away. So it's like they hang up and they get a call straight away from BYD. So
okay. So if I was an installer and I was installing a Fronius Gen 24 inverter with a BYD battery and say there was a commissioning error, who would I contact first? Would I be calling Fronius tech support to work out what's going on? You guys would be the first point of call there?
Well, look, it depends on what it is, but usually we're the first point of call anyway. So look, we're happy to take that on. And then it's only if it gets to a certain stage, which is not very often, then we would call in the BYD guys to help out. So, most of the time, because you're commissioning unless it's something very obvious that it looks like the battery's doing, then that's something you could call BYD about. But otherwise, it's and also in all fairness, they also do some troubleshooting for the inverter side. So, we've trained them up. We have regular catch-up sessions to see what issues are popping up in the field, what are common things that from installation perspective that's not going right, or setting perspective. So we're keeping close contact with that. So
yeah, okay. The next question I had is, so we've done a few BYD installs now. I understand that we had to install a contactor and a relay, and they were separate. They weren't supplied by Fronius or BYD. We had to source them ourselves. And the first time I did it, it was quite difficult to find the exact relay that I wanted, and we ended up having some delays, and it was a bit of a headache. And then one of the suppliers came out and they said that there's a pre-built backup box that we could purchase for $1,100 or something like that. And then we basically just wire into that. So if we were doing a Fronius installation with BYD, do you recommend we go with a backup box or build our own? Or
look, it's really hard. Depends on the situation. The main reason we have it externally to it is obviously we operate in various different countries. It gives you more flexibility of where you can position the components. So up until now, you've had to get a contactor and a relay in order to be able to do it, and that can either go in the main switchboard, or you can have a separate switchboard, or you can have the meter and the contactor separate, or you can have them together. Gives you a lot of flexibility depending on the site. So I wouldn't really say there's one's better than the other. The backup boxes are usually built by the distributors we deal with. Makes it easy if you've got installers that, I'd say probably your one-man bands, probably because they're the ones that always do the install. Once you've done one, then you kind of know what to do with it. Whereas if you've got a whole team of installers and they change each week, etc., then it may be easy to go with a box that's pre-configured, etc. So we've seen how that is. So I'm not sure if you've seen that yet. Our backup controller. So we're bringing out. We realise that in some cases, people want to have less. Installers want to have less things to do. So we're bringing and have our all coming from the one manufacturer. So we've brought out our first version of the backup controller, which is then has the contactor and the 12-volt relay within it. And it's a lot easier to connect. It's very easy to wire up, and then you just have your meter separate.
Yeah, that's what we found after we did a few installs where we wired it ourselves. We found it was just, as far as an installer kind of perspective, it was too much room for error. So it was easier for me as a head of the company because we've got 5 or 6 teams and it's different people every day. It was easier just to get the backup box. Yeah. We just buy it, just send it out, and just install it next to the switchboard, and they just connect into that.
Yeah.
So I found that to be a really good solution there. But yeah, it took 1 or 2 installations, which were a bit bumpy at the start. But yeah, we got there. While we were on the topic of the batteries, last week we had someone come in from Amber Electric, Emmanuel. Now, I had a great conversation with him. Now, we were talking about all the benefits from Amber. Now, is the BYD and Fronius combo compatible with Amber currently?
Yes and no. So that's straight out. So look, it basically to 90% it is. So if it's a single inverter system, then it is. It's only when you have multi-inverter systems is where it doesn't have all the controls yet, but that's, I think, 1 or 2 months away, where that will then also be fully completed, the integration. Yeah.
Multi-inverters.
Yeah.
So say you're saying a hypothetical situation is maybe you have like a 10 kilowatt Cymo with BYD batteries connected to it, but then you have another 10 kilowatt Cymo or something.
Correct.
And they're connected up together.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, some people do that, particularly around batteries. Some people go for, I think there was a while we were doing like 5 kilowatt Cymos. They might have a 5 kilowatt hybrid and another maybe 10 kilowatt non-hybrid.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, okay. So those types of setups do happen. I was trying to think how often that would happen, but I can think of a few times we have done similar things. Yeah, okay. It's good to know because Amber seems like it really benefits customers a lot, particularly with batteries. So you want to make sure you've got exposure to that market.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really interesting that Fronius does, which I don't think really anyone else does, is the PV outlet.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, when the grid goes down, you can have a power point that runs off the sun, limited to 3 kilowatts, I believe. So tell me about that. How many of those have you actually been seeing out there in the field? Have you been getting good reports from the customers on that? Good feedback?
Look, it's very hard to tell how many, but some embrace it and some don't. They just want to go for the full backup. But we basically market it or see it as a no frills, easy, less components, like just very simple type of backup. If you want to, let's say, because the thing is, it doesn't run when the grid's there. It only runs when the grid's not there at the moment. So we are coming up with a solution that you can configure it to be continuous power. But the main reason is for, let's say the sun is out and you just want some power to do something, charge your phone or computer, or let's say, or even just keep a fridge kind of running. You'd have to unplug it and put it in, but just have some kind of basic power without a high level of cost. So just meaning a basic, box underneath with a power point on it, and that's it. So,
Yeah, we had a lot of people really excited about that, and sometimes it has to be explained really clearly what they're actually going to get, because like you said, it doesn't automatically swap over. It's just a power point, and the power point is dead when its solar inverter is connected to the grid normally. So if there is a grid outage and they want to put their fridge in, they have to actually go out, unplug their fridge and plug it into the power point. Yeah. It has to be near the power point. We had one homeowner that she wanted a fridge inside the house on the power point.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool, but your inverter's in the garage. Yeah. So I think we ended up running a cable up through a roof and into the kitchen. Yeah. But yeah, it is something that's very manual at this point. So it's good to hear that you're looking into, ways which you can make it kind of automatically change over, continuous, so it runs when the solar is connected.
Yeah.
No, that's really good to know. That's a good feature. I'll circle back to the Wattpilot Go, because there's one thing I forgot to really kind of elaborate on, or I wanted your opinion. So if someone was looking at another EV charger, like a Zappi charger, why do you think they would consider a Fronius Wattpilot over a Zappi or a Tesla wall connector or any of the other big names?
So it probably really depends on what other components you have the system. So trying to keep it in the same ecosystem. So if you've got a Fronius inverter, then it's definitely an advantage to have that, because there's a lot of different controls that you have over the whole system. So let's say you have a Gen 24, and let's say you would put in a Zappi. I mean, I'm not 100% familiar with Zappi, but I think now they can do solar soaking. If somebody got excess, that can, charge the car. But let's say you have a stationary battery with that, or you have, when it goes to vehicle to grid or something like that, then you need to have a good integration with the inverter, which is like the heart of the system. And so when you have a stationary battery, or let's say you have hot water diverter like they have in Europe a lot, so with our own pilot, then they all need to coordinate with each other, like which one gets priority. Do you want to have hot water first, or do you want to have the stationary battery charged, and to what level first before you start charging the car, or you want the charged car to have priority? There's lots of different loads, and you need to coordinate with each other. So yeah, if you do something like a Zappi, then it's probably, for that basic solar soaking, it's probably easy, but and also in visualization as well. So you can visualize it all on our portal or on the app and SolarWeb, so you can see exactly what loads and what power flows are happening in the whole system.
Yeah, the power flow in the Fronius app is really good. It's really clear. I like how they lay it out. So some apps are really confusing. I used to actually prefer Tesla's app before they updated it.
Okay.
So when it was just 4 circles and you could see which way the power was going.
Yeah.
And then they changed the app so it was like the house. They were trying to make it easier for the layman to understand, but it actually made it harder for me at first. I'm just like, just show me. I get it. I get the difference between the grid, the car, the house, and then they're like showing this just the picture of the house. It was a bit confusing, but I got used to it obviously.
Yeah. They all seem to be going that direction of a picture of a house, and everyone's kind of followed that a bit.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's a good point you make around the ecosystem, because often if people go down the road of a Tesla product, of a Tesla car, sometimes, look, we work a lot with Tesla and we would kind of say, look, if you are going to do that, then we recommend committing to the Tesla ecosystem all the way. If you've got a Tesla car and you want a Tesla Powerball, you have one app. But Fronius has a very similar offering with their app is really good, and the Fronius Wattpilot charging the cars and everything in there. I'd be interested to see the integrations with Amber, particularly now. You may or may not know this, but Amber have recently acquired Charge HQ about a week. Yeah, it was. I'm sure you know what's going on, but it was only about a week ago. So I think a week and a half ago. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that, if we can see what we can do with a Fronius Wattpilot on Amber with Charge HQ. I think there's going to be some cool features there.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because it's all about when you should import energy and when you should export and also cease export. So I guess with the Amber, you've got the two different directions which you need to control. And being EV chargers, I don't want to get super technical here, but with the OCPP protocol, so in terms of the control, is a cloud-based protocol rather than a local type control. So where Amber is also very good at doing all their cloud control of the inverters. So. But yeah, it's a different, not just using a normal API, it's a special type of protocol that's used. Yeah.
So one thing with Amber is that a feature that they had was the energy curtailment, because that's a big thing that's buzzing at the moment, or that people are paranoid about, is they're really worried that they're going to get charged for sending energy back to the grid in future, which for your average person on your average energy plan, they're not there yet. They might get stuff all, but they won't get charged. But for Amber customers, they might actually get penalised for sending power back to the grid in the middle of the day.
Yep.
So the solution to that would be to install just a Fronius consumption meter with the Fronius inverter. And if it was connected with Amber, you could get around that, just curtail it down.
Correct, yeah.
And then match the loads in the house, similar to an export limitation device, where it'll provide the energy to the house that you need, so you don't have to worry about buying power, but it'll stop you from selling power to the grid when you're going to get charged.
Yeah.
Which is, I think that's going to be a big thing in the future. I think people are really going to need a lot more control around their system. So I think these basic cookie cutter systems, people just going for a basic inverter and with no smart meter or anything, I think those days are gone.
Yeah. I mean, smart meter, I think for many, many years, I think is an essential part of the system. Even if you're not export limited, etc., in terms of future proofing, and then also gathering data for, if you're not sure about a battery, gathering all that data to then really work out what battery size you want to have going down the road,
Yeah. I'll steal a quote from Jake Warner from Penrith Solar. I saw said this, I think, on like an ad or something, but he said, buying solar without a smart meter is like buying a car without a speedo. You just got no idea what you're doing. That's kind of true. So credit to him for saying that. But
I think that actually, to be honest, I think that quote actually came from Adrian Aronjo, our ex-GM. So
stole it. No, we all steal stuff off each other every time, from time to time.
That's okay.
But no, look, it is really important to have a smart meter. I think, like, before, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, smart meter, an extra $300 or $400." They're like, nah, don't worry about it. Just give me the system. I don't really care what it does as long as it saves me money. But now people are getting a lot more into the data and monitoring the system. So it's good to make sure that you've got that. Sounds like Fronius has got a really good app and everything set up with the SolarWeb there. One of the other things I wanted to touch on as well, we talked briefly about the commercial inverters. Now, this is probably more for the installers out there. Back in the day, we used to work with the Eco inverters, the Fronius Eco, I think 25 kilowatt. I didn't really like them, to be honest, because I believe it had the one MPPT, and you had to have all the strings had to be the same length, and we were doing like 120 panel installation. Every string had to be the same length, had to be basically a very small window that the voltages could be in, and current rating and the short circuit current and everything had to be perfect. And if you were out of that, or if one string was longer than another, the inverter would just crack the shits basically, and just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
And there was times where we were doing technical roofs and commercial installations, trying to get around air conditioners, and we couldn't make the strings perfect. It was an absolute nightmare, personally, in my opinion, to work with. Now, what are you guys doing with the new commercial inverters? Is that still a thing, or do we have multiple trackers?
So just to follow up on the eco one, you're like 100% correct, but that's why the naming was eco, because it's like an economical model.
Yeah.
So with that, in general, and that's something which I still, even to date, still get installers saying, "Oh, I didn't know you could do that." So yes, each string length needs to be identical, but you can have each individual string facing in a different direction. It can be east-west, doesn't have to be east-west, north-south, whatever it is. And so, but obviously we realise that not all roofs can do that. So this is why it's an economical model. In terms of the voltage window, again, that's not always in your hands to be able to control the string length of what's in there. However, if you can do that, then you're actually putting the inverter in its most efficient part of its conversion. So you should be trying to do that anyway, regardless if it's got 3,000 trackers on it or whatever, but you should be trying to get that sweet spot anyway. And this is just forcing you to kind of do it. So, but we understand it. Yeah, it's not good for all roofs. So you just need to put it in where you can. And we've always said in the past is, if it's a larger system, use an eco where you can, and then just top that up with Simos or more flexible type inverters with it.
Yeah. It reminded me of times we've had, I think, 3 25 kilowatt ecos and then just banged a 5 kilowatt primo on the side to make the string design work on this installation. It was a good inverter. Like, it worked really well once it was installed properly. But yeah, I think because the last time we installed a Toro, it has multiple strings. So is that the way you guys are moving for your commercial installations?
So yeah, it depends on which Toro. There's lots of different versions. There is single tracker one, there's 3 tracker ones, etc. There's ones with a wider voltage range in terms of a booster. But the next one we got coming out, obviously, because a lot of the roofs are getting trickier, then that'll have a multiple, I think around 10 trackers, I think it is. So we are moving to inverters which have a lot more trackers and things. So.
Okay. So tell me about the Fronius partner network that you've got. So this is installers that you have that have worked with Fronius for some time. They're pre-vetted by Fronius. Like, what's involved in that? Like, how special are these people? And if there was an installer out there that wanted to join, what would be involved in becoming a Fronius partner?
So I'm not a full expert on it because I cover too many different areas I need to try and be an expert on. But the latest, I spoke to our FSP, Fronius Service, or Solutions Partner, we call it now, this morning. So it is a group. It's meant to be a group of installers or companies that have had additional training. Also show the values that Fronius also portrays, and anyone can apply for it. So it's an application process you put in as to why you would want to be a Fronius solution partner. We look at all the various things in there. So it's not about volumes. You don't have to be a high volume seller. It's more really around the ethics, the technical expertise of the company, what they're looking at to do with it, and there is benefits out of it. So I'm not fully aware of all the different benefits now. So, but you get additional training, and they should be seen, or they're seen in the market, or from customers, gives them a point of reference where these are installers or solar retailers that have done additional training and get kept up more to date as to what's happening. Also, let's say be involved in pre-series launches or let's say workshops about getting feedback from the market, all these types of things. So it's like a very much closer partnership with these installers.
Okay, that's good. The other thing I want to ask you about is microinverters and power optimizers. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are diehard Enphase fans or diehard Solar Edge fans, or some people just swear by Tygo optimizers. Now, Fronius doesn't have a solution that you guys produce yourself. So if there's an installation with trees and stuff, do you recommend going down the road of power optimizers, or what solution do you think we should be looking at there?
Also, look, depends on if you, as multifaceted, like as the roof arrays, depending on what it's exactly doing. So optimizers and microinverters definitely have their place. So for example, if you've, I think Enphase probably, I'm not an expert on it, but I think Enphase probably does it better or gives you more flexibility with it. If you're just putting a few panels here on this roof and like various different roofs and that's scattered around, there's definitely scenarios where microinverter system's great, or let's say one with optimizers. If it's to do with just with pure shading, that's been debunked on various different fronts. So
Fact-checked. Fact-checked.
Fact-checked.
False misinformation around...
Yeah, look, I mean, there's been various universities done it, but also string inverter with global maximum power point tracking. So that's where it's a more dynamic type power point tracking, looking for the maximum power point, and doing scans of the array to see where the shading is, and basically helping the panels adjust themselves to cope with the shading. So in those scenarios, need to look online or read reports. It's wouldn't say strings are better than microinverters or optimizers, but they're pretty much on par. Put it there. In some scenarios, string perform better with a good global maximum power point tracker, and other scenarios you might be slightly ahead on with a microinverter system or optimizers. But
Yeah, because a lot of people say, and a lot of, the old school sales reps in the solar industry, they say things like, if you've got a tree on one side or an antenna on one side of the array and it shades this one panel on the edge of a string of 10 or 12 panels, then that whole string is going to go down to zero. Yeah. And they almost use it as a scare tactic. And I swear I've seen installations and stuff where we have had one panel on the edge, and like I've had a 6.6 doing 5 kilowatts, which is its peak, and it had one panel on the edge shaded and it was still doing its peak. So you think that the shading, although it's not a positive thing and it can reduce the output, you think that the idea that one panel shaded is just going to completely obliterate the whole string has been debunked?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What about arc fault detection and things around the technology of, I guess when I say arc fault, I'm talking about small fires or large fires, houses burning down, things like that. I think we mentioned firefighters before. We've had a firefighter. He works with Enphase now. He comes from Las Vegas Fire Service in America. He's come down and talked to us about the benefits of Enphase and how it's much safer, and the arc fault is going to reduce the chances of a fire. If there is a short arc fault, it'll just snap out and bring the voltage down to zero. Now, how does that work with Fronius? Do you have a solution for that?
So especially the new inverters have arc fault detection in them as well. So yeah, similar thing. We're also constantly refining that. So we gather arcs signatures, or let's say trip signatures that the inverters gather. So we've got multiple millions of signatures that have been gathered, and then you optimize the let's say the detection mechanism to prevent false tripping, etc. as well. So when that is detected, then basically that disconnects the inverter from consuming power, and that's what's then fueling the arc when it's there. So if you're not pulling current anymore, then the arc will just go out by itself.
Yeah, that's the problem with solar panels on the roof, is obviously when the sun's there and they're all connected, is the current rating can be quite high, as long as it's connected to the inverter until you disconnect it. So yeah, it can be dangerous. You see some house fires and stuff in Queensland from the old RTIs, the rooftop isolators that catch on fire, and the fire brigade are just watching it burn. So luckily we've gone away from rooftop isolators on new installations a couple of years ago now. So it's good to see them gone, because they were just a liability, if you ask me. And I think sometimes, you talk about microinverters and power optimizers on the roof, you are putting more electronics up on the roof in direct sunlight on the hottest part of the roof. So although they do provide some benefits, and there are many instances where they're great, but I guess it's not a one size fits all solution. And I suppose there's always going to be a trade-off. So yeah, you get that panel level optimization, but potentially there's a liability that maybe there's more stuff that could go wrong with the system.
Correct. Yeah.
So yeah, there's no right or wrong answers. There's only really trade-offs, I think, with that. But yeah, no, that's good to know. What about other string inverters now? Fronius was, to be honest, Fronius was the best, undoubtedly, unquestioned, the industry leader for a very long time. And in recent years, unfortunately, I have to say other inverter manufacturers have caught up a lot. So there's other inverters like SunGrow are really popular at the moment. There's probably the most popular inverter in Australia by volume. So what do you think are like the key differentiators between, say, SunGrow and Fronius?
So look, I'm not an expert on the SunGrow. So one of the main things, as you see, we're probably one of the only manufacturers that have the active cooling in there. So it's a massive part of longevity. So part of sustainability is longevity. So not continuously, like breaking down, having to replace it with a new product, etc. So our products are designed for like a lifetime of 20 years. That's what we do when we're doing all the design life for it. So all the individual components are looked at and tested individually before they get chosen for the inverter. And a big part of keeping components cool or keeping components as the longevity of component is keeping them cool. So you're roughly looking at about 10 degrees increase of temperature, like halves the life of the component. So with that, we've measured, wouldn't say SunGrow, but various competitor products. We've measured and looked at certain components in there, done heat maps, etc., and looked at what the rating of the component, and they're pushing it pretty hard to the limit, whereas we have a big buffer in there in terms of what their temperature rating is in order to keep them a longevity for the lifetime of the inverter. Yeah,
that's good. Some of the inverters I've seen, I don't mind naming names, GrowWatt, right? So GrowWatt, look, it's probably not as bad as people say it is, but I will say we used to, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we installed them for a little bit. It was as an offering that we had. And I remember installing one and it was a really hot day and it was pumping out 5 kilowatts and it was so hot. Like you put your hand on the inverter and it almost burned your hand. It was crazy how hot it is. And it's funny, back then, some of the suppliers had a bit of a sales pitch around GrowWatt compared to Fronius. They're like, what's the difference between GrowWatt and Fronius? They're like, yeah, well, GrowWatt comes with a 10-year warranty. And I think Fronius was 5 + 5 at the time. And they were going, the other thing was, they were saying, for the price of a GrowWatt, it could die 3 times and you could buy it 3 times and you'd be better off than if you bought a Fronius. And I thought, is that really what you want?
Yeah.
Like, is that really you want it? And it's funny even now there are inverters where like we installed it and 2 years later it died and GrowWatt, no worries, we'll do the warranty, we'll pay you $150 to go replace it. Okay, cool. Go replace it again. A couple of years later, same thing again. And okay, maybe the customer got the replacements for free under warranty, but the lost time of when the system was down and we were dealing with all the crap, like, do you really want that? I would rather not deal with that personally.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of installations where I've gone to retrofit a battery, a Tesla Power or something. Oh, we've got solar already. Oh, when did you get solar? 12, 15 years ago. Okay. Does it still work? Yeah. What inverter is it? Fronius.
Okay.
So we go have a look. There's this like tank, the original like Fronius inverters look like a tank on the wall, the big like boxy ones.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, they obviously build them well if they're still working after all this time. So it's good that the company's been around for a while. So you can prove that, 75 years, although not all in solar. You said about 15 years in solar?
No, 25. So I think the Sunrise inverter, I think in 92 it was released. So, yeah.
Okay.
And there's still, by the way, we can still fix those. So we have been a while since I think 2 or 3 years ago was the last time we got one. So someone who still wanted, it's not really in terms of obviously out of warranty, but in terms of the cost to fix it, it's a fair amount. But and this particular customer then decided against it. But technically, we can still fix them. So
Yeah, okay. So can I ask you one question then? If you have some advice that you were giving to someone who was looking to buy solar for their house, what do you think are the most important things to look for when you're, say, buying, or, you're going to have a consultation, you're designing a system for your house? What do you think are the biggest considerations that a homeowner should have?
Okay. So, it depends on each homeowner is different. Some of them have more emphasis on, like sustainability. Everyone wants to save money in the end. So, don't ignore that. That's probably one of the main drivers, or the main driver. But I guess it's the things around that as well. The longevity. I find, this is kind of me personally a bit. I find that's one of the reasons that I've been with Fronius so long, is the ethics between the company as well. So, where's the manufacturer? Where are they based? What's their, let's say, modern slavery type, stance on that. Then what their presence is in Australia. So in terms of, headcount, what their facilities like, what they provide and support. And I think what's really coming into it, which no one really kind of thinks about, is, most of your fleet, I can imagine, you probably, when was the last time you sold a system that you didn't have it online or on a portal that you couldn't see it?
Look, there's been one or two people that live regional on a farm, and actually I had a hilarious one last week. She bought a battery, and she used to say, she said that she normally turns her Wi-Fi off at night to save power.
Okay.
And then she was wondering why her data was all messed up in her battery. And she's like, do I need to keep my internet on 24 hours a day now that I've got solar with a battery? And we're like, you do. But yeah, we have had one or two customers that don't have Wi-Fi at all, and it is a bit problematic because now, most inverters don't have screens anymore. So all inverters pretty much need to be online, and for warranty purposes and monitoring purposes and a lot of reasons. So yeah, if I would have any advice to anyone looking at buying solar, is get Wi-Fi. But yeah, okay. So what else do you think?
So the main reason, the reason behind that question is that especially now, you're probably aware of the Vic backstop, having to do all that kind of stuff. So that's a massive impact for installers, and also I think for solar retailers want to explain it to end customers. Definitely don't envy you guys for having to get that balance of being technical, giving them a technical no without kind of confusing them with technical jargon, but also getting to understand the workings of the system. And so with this, basically, let's call it cloud control, remote control, you're talking about systems. That's the reason why I asked, being connected to the internet. So anything connected to the internet, as you can imagine, is vulnerable for external attacks. Let's say, hackers, infiltration, etc. So look at the company and perhaps maybe where they're based. And look, cybersecurity is a massive topic. So it's not just about what type of protocols do they use going to the inverter. It's about their internal management procedures, their security procedures, their clouds, where they're based, all these kind of things around that. Because now with there being remote control, basically you're tunneling in to these inverters to give them commands. And so that's not always good people that want to do that. So I'd always, me personally, wary about where these things are hosted and which companies are behind them. Yeah,
it's interesting. I was talking to someone else. He said, don't tell anyone that I told you this, but someone in the industry. But I was like, I'll say it because I love it. He goes, it's a conspiracy theory. And I'm like, okay, tell me. But he said that if there's a whole bunch of batteries on a network and they have a charge controller in the battery, because I'm thinking worst case scenario here, or when you say cyber attacks, I'm like, well, what could happen? So if there's a charge controller in the battery that stops the battery from charging up to full when it stops pushing energy into the battery, he said that hypothetically someone who could get control of thousands of batteries could then disable, I think, the charge controller or the safety protocol that would stop the battery from overcharging, get all these batteries to charge up until they basically explode. And it could be like some kind of cyber attack where all the batteries on this network, someone pumps power into them till they explode. I don't think that would be possible. I don't know, but I'm trying to think. What do you think are the worst case scenarios around like cybersecurity threats for an inverter?
So I think that particular scenario, look, probably a bit. I mean,
It's a bit far fetched. Let's just say it's probably a bit far fetched. All right, don't freak out,
like
guys.
getting that. I mean, it really depends also because you're going through multiple layers of securities, etc. So in order to get it down that far, like even. I mean, speaking for Fronius part, even if, let's say, one of our R&Ds who did the programming, getting into that that far down into, for us, it'd be BYD, to actually override those mechanisms is not possible, not even for someone who's like basically programmed all this stuff to hack in there. So, but each manufacturer is different, etc. But I do think it's probably a bit of a far-fetched one. In terms of, I don't know, we call real risks. So there's things that just kind of come to mind in general is I personally think in general, because, I mean, you've been in the industry a long time. So if you go, let's say, go back 20 years or even 15 years, the amount of solar or let's say renewable energy that was on the grid that made up the percentage of the, all the energy in the grid was really low. We're talking about, a couple of percent. But now it's making up such a large portion of the energy mix. It's becoming more attractive for, let's say, an external, let's say, attacker or something. Because you could potentially, if someone did that, let's say you've got so many inverters, I mean, we're talking about minimum demand, et cetera, and all these kind of grid stability. If you, let's say, would turn off, 50% of the fleet in Melbourne or something like that, you could potentially collapse the grid with that. So obviously that's a tricky thing to get to. You'd have to, and this is where the other thing, if you've got cloud-based systems, which are, let's say, a joint system where you've got all sorts of people feeding into it, then, or many different companies or many different clouds connected together, that if that's the attack point, then that could potentially spread out to a lot of devices. Then I guess the other things as well, now with a lot of, I don't know how much you have to do with your support team or the online team, etc. But Fronius was one of the last, probably out of all the manufacturers, to allow remote configuration possibilities. It's in terms of tunneling, let's say installer made a mistake or it needs to change a setting. So in terms of doing that, we spent a lot of time coming up with a method that we were comfortable with from a security perspective, because depending on the architecture or how you're doing it, you could have then an inverter. If you tunnel in there, you can see all the other devices on the network. And potentially, if you wanted to, depending on what kind of things are made up there, you could then get into other devices there. So, yeah, okay. That's interesting. The other one I heard, which was really good, was someone around, let's say apps that control your vehicle charging, that you give away like the digital keys to your car. So I've heard someone say that if you have a Tesla car and you're using a certain app to control your charging, then potentially someone from that smaller company could log into your car and then rock up and just jump in your car and drive off because they've got the digital keys to your car. That's what someone was trying to convince me to not use that program. Okay. They were saying that. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of conspiracies out there or different things, but yeah, I haven't really seen anything happen, to be honest. Yeah. And the other thing I'll ask just quickly, one of the issues that we do get a bit is high grid voltage coming from the street. So I believe it's 256, or what's the standard setting? 253? Depends. There's lots of different settings. So it depends on which one you're talking about.
Okay, depends on what grid you're in. Yeah, okay. So sometimes we install an inverter and then it basically shuts down in the middle of the day. The customer calls me or someone at my company furious. Their inverter's shutting down in peak sunlight. What the hell is going on? And they have the nice bell curve that just drops off. And I know straight away that it's high grid voltage coming from the street or from the inverter. Yeah. So, but there are settings that you can change within the Fronius inverter to allow a higher tolerance of grid voltage, which is something that we would go do on site previously. So if someone has issues with the high grid voltage from the street and you need to adjust the settings in the inverter, is that something you guys can do remotely, or do you still need an installer to go to site and like two-factor kind of that to get it to happen?
No, we can do it. So you guys can do it as well now, at least with the Gen 24s. With the older Snap inverters, we can't because of the protocol that was in there. But with the Snap inverter, with the Gen 24 series or anything which has got a pilot card in it, which is the data card, that can be done via the Sol web portal. So you need to be a supervisor within it and a registered installer with us. And then it allows you to get to the web interface of the inverter to change the settings. So,
okay, cool. It's good to know. So, lastly, I just ask, where do you think Fronius is going next? If you're allowed to say, is there anything coming up? Where do you see the industry and Fronius sitting in the industry in the next, say, 5 years?
So look, I think you mentioned before, batteries are a big part of things now. So we are, and you mentioned before, so that we used to have a battery and what's happening. So we are looking at bringing out another battery again. So it's in the works at the moment. I don't have an exact timeline on it, but it's a Fronius battery. And I think the VPPs and batteries within the energy mix and balancing the grid. So let's say grid balancing type functionality or products to do that. Also, energy management, everything to do around the ecosystem is becoming a part of that as well. So, the energy markets, I think, are going to be, as I said, with VPPs is one trajectory, but everything to do with balancing the grid and the market, I think, is we've got various products coming out to, let's say, help enable those type of functionalities, or let's say function.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. All right. Well, no worries. Well, I think we'll leave it at that. But yeah, Rod, thanks for coming in today. That was really good. And we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks, Rod.